My name is Brooke Sullivan. I'm 29 years old, and I'm standing outside what used to be my family home in complete shock. 6 months ago, I left for a work assignment in London, trusting my sister Charlotte with a simple power of attorney for emergencies. Now I'm staring at strangers who are showing me legal documents proving they bought my house. The new owners are as confused as I am, but their paperwork is legitimate. My sister somehow sold my inheritance without my knowledge or permission, and I just discovered she pocketed $300,000 that rightfully belonged to me. Before we dive into this unbelievable story of family betrayal and revenge, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you think family should stick together no matter what, hit that like button. But if you believe some betrayals are unforgivable, make sure to subscribe, because you're about to see exactly how I made my sister pay for what she did. Trust me, this story has more twists than a mountain highway, and you won't want to miss a single detail of how justice was served. The house had been in our family for 3 generations. Our grandmother, Dorothy Sullivan, raised Charlotte and me there after our parents divorced when we were kids. When Grandma Dorothy passed away 2 years ago, everyone expected the house would go to both of us equally. Instead, her will specifically left everything to me alone. Charlotte was furious, claiming I had manipulated our grandmother during her final months. The truth was simpler than that. Grandma Dorothy had watched Charlotte struggle with gambling problems and poor financial decisions for years. She knew I would preserve the family legacy, while Charlotte would probably sell it within months to pay off her debts. When I got the London assignment, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to let Charlotte cool down about the inheritance. I figured 6 months apart would help heal our relationship. I gave her power of attorney strictly for emergencies, like if the furnace broke or pipes burst during winter. She promised to check on the house weekly and handle any urgent maintenance issues. I even left her detailed instructions about which contractors to call for different problems. Looking back, I should have seen the signs of what she was planning. Charlotte had been asking strange questions about property taxes, deed transfers, and whether I had a will. At the time, I thought she was just being responsible about family finances. The real estate agent, a nervous man named Thomas Wright, initially refused to meet with me. When I finally cornered him at his office, he revealed the shocking truth. Charlotte had contacted him 3 months after I left, claiming I had died in a car accident in London. She provided what appeared to be a death certificate from British authorities, and legal documents naming her as my sole heir. Thomas admitted he should have verified the documents more carefully, but Charlotte seemed genuinely grief-stricken. She even brought fake obituary clippings from London newspapers. The whole scheme was so elaborate that even experienced professionals believed her story. Detective Rivera from the Denver Police Department explained that what Charlotte did constituted multiple felonies. Identity theft, forgery, mail fraud, and grand larceny were just the beginning. The fake death certificate alone carried a 5-year federal sentence. Detective Rivera had seen cases like this before, usually involving desperate people facing financial ruin. Charlotte's husband Kevin was just as shocked as everyone else. He insisted he knew nothing about any house sale or fake death certificate. Kevin worked long hours running his construction business, and trusted Charlotte to handle their household finances. He never questioned the sudden appearance of expensive purchases, because Charlotte claimed she had gotten a large inheritance from a distant relative. As the investigation deepened, more disturbing details emerged. Charlotte hadn't just forged my signature on the deed transfer. She had created an entire false identity using my social security number and personal information. She opened bank accounts in my name, applied for credit cards, and even filed a fake tax return claiming the house sale as capital gains. The money from the sale had disappeared into various accounts, some of which were already emptied. Charlotte had purchased a brand new Mercedes, expensive jewelry, and made large cash payments to several Las Vegas casinos. She had planned this betrayal for months, researching legal loopholes and studying fraud techniques online. Kevin's discovery that their joint savings account was nearly empty led to explosive arguments. Charlotte claimed hackers had stolen their money, and she was working with the bank to recover it. But Kevin found receipts for luxury purchases hidden in her car. Designer handbags worth thousands of dollars, first-class plane tickets to gambling destinations, and payment stubs for a private poker game that cost more than most people make in a year. When Kevin confronted her about the receipts, Charlotte broke down crying and claimed she had a shopping addiction that was triggered by stress over my supposed death. Her lies were becoming more desperate and contradictory with each passing day. The betrayal cut deeper than just money. Charlotte and I had shared everything growing up. We were each other's maid of honor, godmothers to each other's children, and best friends despite our differences. I had loaned her money countless times without expecting repayment. I had co-signed for her first apartment, helped her through her divorce from her abusive first husband, and supported her when she was struggling to get her real estate license. The idea that she could fake my death and steal my inheritance while I was working overseas seemed impossible. But the evidence was overwhelming, and I realized I had never truly known my sister at all. Standing in that detective's office, listening to the full scope of Charlotte's crimes, I felt something cold and determined settle in my chest. She hadn't just stolen my house and money. She had tried to erase my entire existence to cover her tracks. The fake death certificate meant she could have claimed my life insurance, my retirement accounts, and any other assets I owned. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, or a desperate mistake. This was a calculated attempt to destroy my life for her financial gain. At that moment, I decided Charlotte would learn exactly what it felt like to lose everything that mattered to her. Within 24 hours of discovering Charlotte's fraud, I had assembled a team of professionals dedicated to destroying her carefully constructed lies. My attorney, Jennifer Walsh, specialized in white-collar crime recovery and had a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Jennifer immediately filed emergency motions to freeze all accounts connected to Charlotte's name or social security number. We also filed civil lawsuits against the real estate company, the title insurance company, and anyone else who had failed to properly verify Charlotte's fraudulent documents. The goal wasn't just financial recovery, but maximum public exposure of her crimes. Charlotte's reaction to the lawsuits was pure panic disguised as indignation. She called me screaming about how I was destroying our family over a misunderstanding. According to Charlotte, she had acted in good faith believing I was dead, and had only tried to preserve our grandmother's house by selling it to responsible buyers. She claimed the money was being held in trust for my estate, and she was planning to donate most of it to charity in my memory. Every word was a lie, but Charlotte delivered her performance with such conviction that I almost admired her acting skills. She even managed to cry on cue when describing her grief over my supposed death. The investigation revealed that Charlotte had spent weeks researching how to forge British death certificates. She had contacted multiple funeral homes in London asking about procedures for American citizens who died abroad. She had even called the British consulate pretending to be a grieving sister seeking information about repatriating remains. The level of premeditation was staggering. This wasn't an impulsive crime of opportunity, but a carefully orchestrated plan that took months to execute. Charlotte had studied my travel itinerary, researched British bureaucracy, and practiced forging official documents until her fakes were nearly perfect. Kevin's construction business became collateral damage in Charlotte's scheme. When clients learned that his wife was facing federal fraud charges, several cancelled major contracts. Kevin's reputation in the Denver building community was built on trust and reliability, qualities that seemed questionable when your spouse was an international con artist. The stress was destroying Kevin's health and his relationship with his teenage son from his first marriage. Kevin had worked 15 years building his company from a one-man operation into a respected firm with 20 employees. Charlotte's crimes threatened to undo everything he had accomplished. Charlotte's mother-in-law, Mrs. Blackwood, was a prominent figure in Denver society who took family reputation very seriously. When she learned about Charlotte's arrest and the fraudulent house sale, Mrs. Blackwood immediately called an emergency family meeting. She threatened to cut Kevin and his son out of her substantial inheritance unless Charlotte made full restitution for her crimes. Mrs. Blackwood had survived the Great Depression and had no patience for financial irresponsibility or criminal behavior. She viewed Charlotte as a gold digger who had corrupted her son and endangered the family's good name. The pressure from multiple lawsuits, criminal charges, and family ultimatums was pushing Charlotte toward increasingly desperate measures. She hired Bradford Sinclair, an expensive criminal defense attorney known for representing white-collar criminals. Bradford's strategy was to portray Charlotte as a grieving sister who made poor decisions while emotionally devastated by my supposed death. He planned to argue that Charlotte's gambling addiction was a mental health issue that impaired her judgment. Bradford believed he could get Charlotte a plea deal for probation and community service if she made full restitution and completed addiction counseling. Charlotte's behavior became increasingly erratic as legal bills mounted and her support system crumbled. She started calling our mutual friends claiming I was persecuting her for an honest mistake. She posted long emotional messages on social media about family forgiveness and the importance of second chances. Charlotte even contacted our local newspaper, trying to get them to cover her side of the story. She portrayed herself as a victim of a greedy sister who refused to share an inheritance and was using the legal system for revenge. For a few days, some people actually believed her version of events. The turning point came when Charlotte attempted to seduce my ex-boyfriend Tyler to gain inside information about my legal strategy. Tyler and I had remained friends after our breakup 2 years earlier, and he still had keys to my apartment for emergencies. Charlotte showed up at Tyler's workplace claiming she needed to retrieve personal items from my apartment for the criminal investigation. She tried to convince Tyler that I was mentally unstable from the trauma of learning about her supposed betrayal. Charlotte suggested that Tyler could help mediate between us and maybe rekindle our romantic relationship once the legal issues were resolved. Tyler immediately called me to report Charlotte's approach. He had recorded their conversation on his phone because something about her story didn't make sense. Charlotte had offered to pay Tyler $5,000 for copies of my personal documents and information about my legal representation. She wanted details about my financial accounts, insurance policies, and any other assets she might have missed in her initial theft. The recording provided clear evidence of witness tampering and obstruction of justice, adding new federal charges to Charlotte's growing list of crimes. When I heard Tyler's recording, I realized Charlotte still didn't understand the gravity of her situation. She was treating this like a civil dispute between sisters rather than a complex criminal case involving multiple federal agencies. Charlotte seemed to believe she could charm or manipulate her way out of serious legal consequences. She had always been the prettier sister, the one who could talk her way out of trouble or convince people to give her another chance. But federal prosecutors weren't impressed by tears or sob stories about family misunderstandings. Charlotte's desperation reached new heights when she realized that charm and manipulation wouldn't save her from federal prison. Her attorney Bradford Sinclair was demanding a $50,000 retainer for trial representation, money she no longer had access to due to the asset freezes. Charlotte began making increasingly wild claims about my mental state, telling anyone who would listen that I was delusional and had fabricated the entire fraud story to steal her rightful inheritance. She even claimed that our grandmother's will was forged and that the house should have been split equally between us from the beginning. The most disturbing escalation came when Charlotte manipulated our 72-year-old father into believing I was the real villain in this situation. Dad had been living in an assisted living facility since his stroke 3 years earlier, and his cognitive abilities weren't what they used to be. Charlotte visited him daily, spinning elaborate stories about how I was using the legal system to destroy her life over a simple misunderstanding. She told Dad that I had always been jealous of her beauty and success, and now I was finally getting my revenge by having her arrested on false charges. Dad's confused phone calls broke my heart. He couldn't understand why his daughters were fighting in court instead of working things out like family. Charlotte had convinced him that she was the victim of my vindictive personality, and that all the criminal charges were based on lies I had told the police. Dad begged me to drop the charges and forgive Charlotte, because life was too short for family feuds. He kept saying that our grandmother would be ashamed of how we were treating each other. Charlotte's manipulation of our elderly father's diminished mental capacity was perhaps the cruelest thing she did during this entire ordeal. Charlotte's most dangerous escalation involved attempting to frame me for drug possession. She had kept a spare key to my apartment from years earlier when she occasionally house-sit while I traveled for work. Using that key, Charlotte broke into my apartment and planted cocaine in my bedroom and car. She then made an anonymous tip to police claiming she had witnessed me selling drugs to teenagers outside a local high school. The plan was to have me arrested on serious drug charges that would undermine my credibility as a witness in her criminal case. The frame-up might have worked if not for my friend Miranda's sharp instincts and quick thinking. Miranda had noticed a suspicious car parked outside my apartment building and had taken photos of the license plate. When police arrived to search my apartment, Miranda insisted they check building security footage before proceeding. The surveillance videos clearly showed Charlotte entering my building with a key and leaving 20 minutes later carrying a small bag. Police found her fingerprints on the drug packaging and traced her car to the high school where the anonymous tip originated. Charlotte's attempt to frame me for drug crimes added several new felony charges, including evidence tampering, filing false police reports, and criminal conspiracy. Detective Rivera explained that Charlotte's actions showed a pattern of escalating criminal behavior that made her a danger to the community. The judge revoked her bail and ordered her held in county jail pending trial. Charlotte's arrest photo showed a woman who looked nothing like the confident, polished person she had always been. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled, her makeup was smeared, and her eyes had the desperate look of someone who finally realized her situation was hopeless. Kevin filed for divorce within hours of Charlotte's arrest for the drug frame-up. He could no longer deny that his wife was a dangerous criminal who posed a threat to everyone around her. Kevin's construction business was struggling to survive the scandal, and his teenage son was being bullied at school because of Charlotte's crimes. Kevin's mother threatened to cut him off financially if he didn't immediately distance himself from Charlotte and her legal problems. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew the real reason was Charlotte's transformation from loving wife to desperate criminal. Charlotte's time in county jail gave her a harsh introduction to the consequences of her choices. Her cellmates included drug dealers, thieves, and violent offenders who had no patience for a privileged suburban housewife complaining about her legal problems. Charlotte's requests for special accommodations, due to her sensitive constitution, were ignored by guards who dealt with real hardship cases daily. The jail's phone system recorded all conversations, so Charlotte couldn't even plot new schemes without law enforcement overhearing her plans. The recorded jail calls revealed the true extent of Charlotte's delusional thinking. She blamed everyone except herself for her current situation. According to Charlotte, "I was a vindictive sister who couldn't accept that she deserved part of our grandmother's inheritance. Kevin was an ungrateful husband who abandoned her during difficult times. The police were corrupt and had been bribed to fabricate evidence against her. Even our father was supposedly conspiring against her by refusing to mortgage his assisted living facility to pay for her legal defense." Bradford Sinclair withdrew as Charlotte's attorney when she couldn't make payments and began demanding that he break into evidence lockers to destroy incriminating documents. Bradford realized that Charlotte was mentally unstable and posed a liability risk to his law practice. He filed motions to withdraw from the case, citing irreconcilable differences and concerns about his client's mental competency. Charlotte was forced to accept a public defender who had hundreds of other cases and couldn't devote the attention her complex charges required. Charlotte's final desperate gambit involved trying to claim diplomatic immunity by marrying a foreign national she met through a prison pen pal service. She believed that marriage to someone with dual citizenship might complicate her prosecution or provide grounds for deportation instead of imprisonment. The plan fell apart when investigators discovered that her pen pal boyfriend was actually another federal prisoner serving time for immigration fraud. Charlotte's attempt to manipulate the legal system through fake marriage schemes only added more charges to her already overwhelming criminal case. Kevin's decision to cooperate with federal prosecutors marked the beginning of Charlotte's complete downfall. As her husband of 8 years, Kevin had access to financial records, computer passwords, and personal information that revealed the full scope of Charlotte's criminal enterprise. Kevin discovered that the house sale was just the tip of the iceberg. Charlotte had been systematically stealing from his construction business for over 2 years, embezzling money from client accounts, and forging contracts to inflate project costs. She had stolen nearly $75,000 from Kevin's business to fund her gambling addiction. The revelation of Charlotte's business embezzlement hit Kevin like a physical blow. His construction company's reputation depended on trust and reliability, qualities that Charlotte had systematically undermined through her theft. Several major clients had already cancelled contracts when news of Charlotte's arrest became public. Kevin faced potential bankruptcy and the loss of his life's work because of his wife's criminal behavior. His 20 employees depended on the business for their livelihoods, and Charlotte's crimes threatened all their jobs. Kevin's cooperation with prosecutors wasn't just about justice, it was about survival. Kevin's most damaging revelation involved Charlotte's systematic forgery of his business signatures on major contracts and bank documents. She had been inflating project estimates and pocketing the difference between quoted prices and actual costs. Charlotte had also applied for business credit lines using Kevin's identity and spent the money on personal expenses. Kevin discovered fake invoices for materials that were never delivered and payroll records, showing payments to employees who didn't exist. Charlotte had turned Kevin's honest construction business into an unwitting money laundering operation for her criminal activities. My attorney Jennifer Walsh worked closely with Kevin to unravel the complex web of Charlotte's financial crimes. Jennifer had seen many fraud cases, but Charlotte's scheme was unusually sophisticated for someone without formal financial training. Charlotte had taught herself advanced accounting principles, studied business law, and researched federal banking regulations to avoid detection. She had even consulted with a tax preparation service about the best ways to hide large cash transactions from government oversight. The premeditation and planning revealed a criminal mind that was both intelligent and completely without conscience. The investigation expanded when Kevin discovered Charlotte's secret gambling activities at the Riverside Casino, 30 miles outside Denver. Charlotte had been visiting the casino twice weekly for over a year, sometimes losing $10,000 in a single night. The casino's security footage showed Charlotte making large cash bets and receiving comp suites for high-roller gamblers. She had developed relationships with other serious gamblers and had borrowed money from dangerous people when her luck ran bad. Kevin learned that Charlotte owed significant amounts to loan sharks, who were now threatening his business and family. Charlotte's gambling addiction explained many of the strange financial irregularities Kevin had noticed but dismissed. Large cash withdrawals that Charlotte claimed were for household expenses. Expensive gifts that she said came from grateful clients of her part-time real estate work. Mysterious phone calls that she claimed were from potential buyers for houses she was trying to sell. Kevin realized that Charlotte had been living a double life for years, maintaining the facade of a successful housewife, while secretly stealing to fund her destructive gambling habit. The alliance between Kevin and me grew stronger, as we discovered more evidence of Charlotte's betrayals. Kevin shared email exchanges where Charlotte discussed selling the family house months before I left for London. She had been researching property values, contacting real estate agents, and planning the fake death certificate scheme long before she put it into action. Kevin also found browser histories showing Charlotte's research into identity theft techniques, document forgery, and methods for hiding stolen money. The digital evidence proved that Charlotte's crimes were premeditated rather than impulsive decisions made during emotional distress. Kevin's mother, Mrs. Blackwood, became an unexpected ally in exposing Charlotte's crimes. Mrs. Blackwood had never fully trusted Charlotte, and had kept detailed records of her interactions with her daughter-in-law over the years. She provided copies of conversations where Charlotte had made suspicious comments about inheritance laws, property transfers, and the difficulty of tracking overseas financial transactions. Mrs. Blackwood had attributed these comments to general conversation about estate planning, but they now appeared to be Charlotte researching her criminal scheme. The discovery of Charlotte's theft from our father's veteran benefits account was perhaps the most heartbreaking revelation. Charlotte had been appointed as Dad's financial power of attorney after his stroke and had systematically stolen his disability payments for nearly 2 years. She had redirected his monthly benefits to an account she controlled and had been making minimal payments to his assisted living facility while pocketing the difference. Dad's care had suffered because Charlotte was stealing money meant for his medical needs and daily expenses. Kevin's emotional breakdown, when he learned about the theft from my father, showed me that he was as much a victim of Charlotte's crimes as anyone else. Kevin had genuinely loved the woman he thought Charlotte was and felt responsible for not recognizing her criminal behavior sooner. He blamed himself for Charlotte's ability to steal from so many people, believing he should have been more suspicious of her financial activities. Kevin's guilt and shame were almost as devastating as the financial losses, and I realized we both needed to heal from the trauma of Charlotte's betrayals. The federal investigation revealed connections between Charlotte and other financial criminals she had met through online gambling forums. Charlotte had been sharing information about successful fraud techniques, and had even provided advice to other scammers about forging death certificates and manipulating probate courts. Her criminal activities extended far beyond stealing from family members, and had potentially helped other criminals victimize innocent people across the country. Charlotte wasn't just a desperate sister who made bad choices, she was an active participant in organized financial crime networks. As Kevin and I worked together to document the full extent of Charlotte's crimes, I began to understand that she had targeted our entire family systematically over many years. The house theft was just the culmination of a long pattern of manipulation, lies, and financial abuse. Charlotte had been studying all of us, learning our weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and planning how to exploit our trust for maximum financial gain. Her transformation from beloved sister to criminal mastermind was complete, and there was no going back to the relationship we once had. Charlotte's discovery of the alliance between Kevin and me triggered a final desperate attempt to destroy everyone who had turned against her. From her jail cell, Charlotte orchestrated a campaign of harassment and intimidation using letters, phone calls, and messages passed through other inmates' visitors. She tried to convince people that Kevin and I were having an affair and had conspired together to frame her for crimes we had actually committed ourselves. Charlotte claimed we had stolen the house money and were using her as a scapegoat to cover our own criminal activities. The fabricated affair allegations were Charlotte's attempt to discredit both Kevin and me as witnesses in her criminal case. She created fake email exchanges suggesting romantic involvement between us and even hired a private investigator to take photos of Kevin visiting my apartment to discuss legal matters. Charlotte believed that if she could prove Kevin and I were romantically involved, she could claim we had conspired to frame her for fraud so we could be together without his wife interfering. The plan showed Charlotte's continued belief that she could manipulate her way out of serious criminal charges through lies and misdirection. Charlotte's harassment campaign extended to my best friend Miranda, who had provided crucial evidence about the drug planting incident. Charlotte wrote letters claiming that Miranda was jealous of our sisterly relationship and had convinced me to fabricate the entire fraud story. She suggested that Miranda had always disliked her and saw this as an opportunity to destroy Charlotte's marriage and reputation. Charlotte even claimed that Miranda had planted the cocaine in my apartment herself as part of an elaborate scheme to frame an innocent woman for crimes she didn't commit. The breaking and entering incident at my temporary apartment represented Charlotte's most dangerous escalation. She somehow obtained a day pass from county jail by claiming she needed to attend a medical appointment for a heart condition. Instead of going to the doctor, Charlotte broke into my apartment looking for evidence she could use to blackmail or discredit me. She was searching for personal documents, financial records, or anything else that might give her leverage in plea negotiations. Charlotte was caught by building security when she triggered the new alarm system Kevin had helped me install. Charlotte's explanation for being found in my apartment was typical of her increasingly desperate lies. She claimed she was worried about my mental health and had broken in to check on my well-being because I hadn't been answering her calls from jail. According to Charlotte, she was a concerned sister trying to help a sibling who was clearly suffering from emotional problems related to our legal dispute. She even claimed she had been planning to clean my apartment as a gesture of goodwill and family reconciliation. The building's security cameras clearly showed Charlotte rifling through my personal belongings and attempting to access my computer. Charlotte's attempt to manipulate media coverage represented her final effort to win public sympathy before her trial. She contacted Rebecca Martinez, a local news reporter known for sensational human interest stories. Charlotte portrayed herself as a victim of a vindictive sister who couldn't accept sharing their grandmother's inheritance fairly. She claimed that I had always been jealous of her beauty and social success, and was using false criminal charges to destroy her life out of spite. Charlotte even suggested that she was being persecuted because of mental health issues that made her vulnerable to exploitation. The news story initially generated some public sympathy for Charlotte, because she was an attractive woman with children who appeared to be a victim of family greed. Charlotte's tearful interview portrayed her as a loving mother and wife who had made mistakes during a difficult time, but didn't deserve to have her life destroyed over family inheritance disputes. Several viewers called the television station expressing support for Charlotte and criticism of what appeared to be my harsh treatment of a struggling sister. For a brief period, public opinion seemed to be turning in Charlotte's favor. The media narrative changed dramatically when Jennifer Walsh provided reporter Rebecca Martinez with copies of the actual court documents and evidence from Charlotte's criminal case. The fake death certificate, forged signatures, and evidence of systematic theft painted a very different picture than Charlotte's sob story. Rebecca Martinez realized she had been manipulated by a skilled con artist and ran a follow-up story exposing Charlotte's lies. The second news report included interviews with Kevin, Detective Rivera, and federal prosecutors, who explained the serious nature of Charlotte's crimes. Charlotte's reaction to the negative media coverage was pure rage and desperation. She called Rebecca Martinez from jail demanding that the reporter retract the story and threatening to sue for defamation. Charlotte claimed that all the evidence against her had been fabricated by corrupt law enforcement officers who were being bribed by my family to frame an innocent woman. She even suggested that the federal prosecutors were part of a conspiracy to cover up their own incompetence by railroading a convenient scapegoat. Charlotte's increasingly paranoid accusations convinced everyone that she was completely detached from reality. The withdrawal of Bradford Sinclair, as Charlotte's defense attorney, marked the end of her ability to mount a serious legal defense. Bradford filed extensive motions documenting Charlotte's attempts to convince him to tamper with evidence, bribe witnesses, and file frivolous lawsuits against everyone involved in her prosecution. Bradford's withdrawal memo described Charlotte as delusional and potentially dangerous to public safety. No other experienced criminal defense attorney would take Charlotte's case, because her reputation for manipulating lawyers and making false accusations had spread throughout Denver's legal community. Charlotte's final manipulation attempt involved Mrs. Blackwood and Kevin's teenage son. Charlotte wrote emotional letters describing how much she missed being part of their family and how the criminal charges had destroyed her mental health. She claimed that Kevin had abandoned her when she needed support most and that Mrs. Blackwood's threats to disinherit Kevin were forcing him to lie about Charlotte's character. Charlotte suggested that if they would provide character witness testimony, she could avoid prison and get the mental health treatment she desperately needed. Both Mrs. Blackwood and Kevin's son refused to have any contact with Charlotte after receiving her manipulative letters. The involvement of federal investigators transformed Charlotte's case from local fraud charges to a complex multi-jurisdictional prosecution involving mail fraud, identity theft, and organized financial crime. Agent Sarah Crawford from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Unit explained that Charlotte's activities had crossed state lines and involved federal banking systems, making this a priority case for federal prosecutors. Agent Crawford had investigated dozens of similar fraud schemes and was impressed by the sophistication of Charlotte's operation and the extent of her criminal network. Charlotte's gambling debts created a dangerous new dimension to her legal problems when loan sharks began threatening Kevin's construction business and family. Vincent Moetti, a known associate of organized crime figures, contacted Kevin demanding payment of Charlotte's $50,000 debt to illegal gambling operations. Moetti made it clear that Charlotte's imprisonment didn't eliminate her financial obligations, and that Kevin's business assets could be seized to satisfy her debts. Kevin was forced to hire private security and change his home address when Moetti's associates began surveilling his teenage son's school. The suicide attempt that Charlotte staged in county jail was designed to generate sympathy and potentially delay her trial while she received psychiatric evaluation. Charlotte used bedsheets to create the appearance of a hanging attempt, but positioned herself so that guards would discover her before any real harm occurred. Her suicide note blamed Kevin, me, and our father for abandoning her during her darkest hour, and claimed that she preferred death to spending years in federal prison. The manipulation was transparent to experienced jail staff, who had seen similar attention-seeking behavior from other inmates. Kevin's divorce proceedings revealed additional evidence of Charlotte's criminal activities that prosecutors hadn't previously discovered. Charlotte had opened credit cards using Kevin's identity and business information, accumulating nearly $30,000 in debt for luxury purchases and gambling activities. She had also forged Kevin's signature on mortgage documents to refinance their family home, and had spent the equity on personal expenses. Kevin's divorce attorney discovered that Charlotte had been systematically stealing from their joint savings account for over 3 years, while claiming the money was being invested for their children's college education. Charlotte's attempt to manipulate our elderly father reached a new low when she convinced him to mortgage his assisted living facility to pay for her legal defense. Dad's diminished cognitive capacity made him vulnerable to Charlotte's emotional manipulation, and she had been calling him daily from jail describing her desperate need for financial help. Charlotte claimed that she was innocent of all charges, and that expensive legal representation was her only hope of avoiding wrongful imprisonment. Dad was preparing to sign mortgage documents when his caseworker intervened and contacted me about the suspicious financial transaction. The discovery that Charlotte had been stealing Dad's veteran benefits for nearly 2 years was the final straw that turned him completely against her. When Dad learned that his difficulty paying for medications and therapy was due to Charlotte's theft of his disability benefits, his confusion and forgiveness transformed into clear anger. Dad's military service in Vietnam had earned him those benefits, and Charlotte's theft was not just a financial crime, but a betrayal of his sacrifice for his country. Dad immediately revoked Charlotte's power of attorney and appointed me as his new financial representative. Charlotte's criminal associates began cooperating with federal investigators when they realized that loyalty to her offered no benefits, while cooperation could reduce their own sentences. Marcus Webb, a professional document forger who had helped Charlotte create the fake death certificate, provided detailed testimony about her criminal planning and her connections to other fraud schemes. Marcus revealed that Charlotte had paid him $5,000 to create multiple false identity documents, and had discussed plans to fake her own death if her schemes were discovered by authorities. The revelation that Charlotte had been advising other criminals through online fraud forums showed that her criminal activities extended far beyond stealing from family members. Chat logs recovered from Charlotte's computer showed her providing detailed instructions about forging death certificates, manipulating probate courts, and hiding stolen assets from law enforcement. Charlotte had become a mentor to aspiring criminals and had potentially enabled dozens of other fraud schemes across the country. Her criminal enterprise was much larger and more sophisticated than anyone had initially realized. Charlotte's increasing desperation led to violent threats against witnesses and prosecutors involved in her case. Recorded jail phone calls captured Charlotte discussing plans to have me killed or seriously injured to prevent my testimony at her trial. She tried to recruit fellow inmates to intimidate witnesses, and even discussed paying for arson attacks against Kevin's construction business. Charlotte's threats were taken seriously enough that the FBI arranged protective custody for Kevin, me, and several other witnesses during the final months before her trial. The asset forfeiture proceedings recovered most of Charlotte's luxury purchases, but the majority of the stolen money had been lost to gambling or spent on untraceable cash transactions. The Mercedes, jewelry, and other expensive items were auctioned off to provide partial restitution to her victims. However, the $300,000 from the house sale would never be fully recovered, because Charlotte had systematically laundered it through multiple accounts and cash transactions. The financial losses were devastating, but the emotional trauma of her betrayal was even more damaging to everyone she had victimized. Charlotte's pre-trial psychiatric evaluation concluded that she was competent to stand trial, but showed clear signs of antisocial personality disorder and pathological gambling addiction. Dr. Robert Chen, the court-appointed psychiatrist, explained that Charlotte's behavior pattern suggested a person who was incapable of genuine empathy or remorse for her actions. Charlotte viewed other people as resources to be exploited rather than human beings deserving of respect and consideration. Dr. Chen's report recommended that Charlotte receive psychological treatment during incarceration, but warned that her fundamental personality disorders were unlikely to change significantly. Charlotte's plea bargain negotiations revealed the full scope of her criminal enterprise and her complete lack of remorse for the devastation she had caused. Federal prosecutor Daniel Kim offered Charlotte a plea deal for 8 years in federal prison plus full restitution to all victims if she provided complete cooperation about her criminal activities and associates. Charlotte initially rejected the plea offer, insisting that she was innocent and that all the evidence against her had been fabricated. She demanded a public trial, where she could tell her side of the story and expose what she claimed was a conspiracy against her. Charlotte's final plea acceptance came only after her public defender explained that conviction at trial would result in a minimum 20-year federal sentence with no possibility of early parole. The evidence against Charlotte was overwhelming, including recorded confessions, physical evidence of forgery, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Charlotte's decision to accept the plea bargain was purely pragmatic rather than any acknowledgement of guilt or expression of remorse. She continued to claim that she was a victim of circumstances and family persecution even while formally pleading guilty to multiple felony charges. The restitution hearing provided an opportunity for Charlotte's victims to describe the impact of her crimes on their lives and finances. Kevin testified about the near bankruptcy of his construction business and the emotional trauma of discovering that his wife was a criminal who had been stealing from his family for years. Dad's testimony about Charlotte's theft of his veteran benefits was particularly powerful because it showed her willingness to victimize the most vulnerable family members for financial gain. Mrs. Blackwood described how Charlotte's crimes had damaged the family's reputation and created lasting divisions among relatives. My victim impact statement focused on the emotional betrayal rather than just the financial losses. I described growing up with Charlotte as my best friend and confidant, and how her decision to fake my death and steal my inheritance had destroyed not just my trust in her but my ability to trust other family members. The fake death certificate meant that Charlotte had been prepared to let everyone believe I was dead rather than admit to her gambling addiction and financial crimes. Her willingness to cause that kind of emotional devastation to our father and other family members showed a level of callousness that was difficult to comprehend. Charlotte's sentencing hearing provided her final opportunity to manipulate public opinion and avoid accountability for her actions. Her statement to the court was filled with excuses, blame shifting, and claims of victimization. Charlotte blamed her gambling addiction, her difficult childhood, financial pressures from Kevin's business, and even claimed that I had driven her to desperate actions by refusing to share our grandmother's inheritance. She tearfully apologized for any pain she had caused, but continued to minimize her crimes and suggests that she deserved sympathy rather than punishment. Judge Patricia Williams rejected Charlotte's attempts to portray herself as a victim and imposed a sentence at the upper end of the federal guidelines. Judge Williams explained that Charlotte's crimes showed extensive planning, manipulation of vulnerable family members, and a complete lack of genuine remorse. The sentence of 12 years in federal prison plus 5 years supervised probation reflected the serious nature of Charlotte's crimes and the need to protect the public from her criminal behavior. Judge Williams also ordered Charlotte to pay full restitution of $420,000 to all victims. Charlotte's assignment to Federal Correctional Institution Danbury in Connecticut meant that she would serve her sentence far from family and friends in Colorado. The federal prison system's policy of housing inmates far from their home communities was designed to prevent continued criminal activities and family manipulation during incarceration. Charlotte's letters from prison initially continued her pattern of manipulation and blame shifting, describing harsh conditions and claiming that she was being persecuted for crimes she didn't commit. Her requests for visits and financial support were ignored by all family members. Kevin's divorce finalization allowed him to rebuild his construction business and personal life without the constant threat of Charlotte's criminal associations. Kevin's new marriage to his high school sweetheart Lisa represented a fresh start and a return to the honest, hard-working values that had guided his life before Charlotte. Kevin's construction company slowly recovered its reputation, as clients recognized that Kevin himself had been a victim of Charlotte's criminal scheme rather than a willing participant. The recovery of our grandmother's house through federal asset forfeiture proceedings took nearly 18 months, but was ultimately successful. The innocent buyers who had purchased the house from Charlotte were compensated through title insurance and government victim assistance programs. I was finally able to return to the family home that held so many childhood memories, though it took extensive renovation to remove the emotional stains of Charlotte's betrayal. The house became a symbol of survival and justice rather than the family gathering place it had once been. Dad's transfer to a new assisted living facility that specialized in veteran care represented his recovery from Charlotte's financial abuse and emotional manipulation. His veteran benefits were restored with full back payments, and he received comprehensive medical care that had been compromised during Charlotte's theft of his disability income. Dad's cognitive abilities improved significantly once he was removed from Charlotte's manipulative influence and received proper nutrition and medical treatment. His clear statement that Charlotte was no longer welcome in his life provided closure for the family trauma she had caused. The federal investigation's expansion revealed that Charlotte's criminal network had victimized dozens of families across multiple states through similar inheritance fraud schemes. Charlotte's cooperation with investigators was limited and self-serving, providing information only when it might reduce her sentence rather than from any desire to help other victims. The prosecution of Charlotte's criminal associates resulted in additional convictions and prison sentences, but the financial losses to victims were largely unrecoverable due to the sophisticated money laundering techniques the network employed. Charlotte's final letter to me before her transfer to federal prison was a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as repentance. She claimed to have found religion in county jail and begged for forgiveness, while simultaneously suggesting that I bore some responsibility for driving her to desperate actions. Charlotte's letter included veiled threats about what she might do after her release and requests for financial support during her incarceration. I burned the letter unread and instructed prison authorities that I had no interest in any future contact with Charlotte under any circumstances. 3 years after Charlotte's sentencing, my life had stabilized into a new normal that didn't include the constant threat of her manipulation and criminal behavior. My marketing consulting business had thrived during my recovery from the trauma, and I had developed expertise in helping other fraud victims rebuild their lives and finances. The experience of fighting Charlotte's crimes had taught me valuable lessons about resilience, legal advocacy, and the importance of surrounding yourself with trustworthy people who genuinely care about your well-being. Kevin's construction business had not only recovered from Charlotte's crimes, but had expanded into high-end residential projects that showcased his craftsmanship and integrity. Kevin's marriage to Lisa brought stability and happiness back into his life, and his teenage son had overcome the bullying and embarrassment caused by his stepmother's criminal conviction. Kevin and I maintained a strong friendship based on our shared experience of survival and recovery, though we were careful to maintain appropriate boundaries given our complicated history. Dad's health and mental clarity had improved dramatically once he was removed from Charlotte's manipulative influence and received proper medical care. His new assisted living facility specialized in veteran services and provided the social interaction and mental stimulation that had been missing during his isolation. Dad rarely spoke about Charlotte anymore, but when he did, it was with clear awareness of how she had victimized him and stolen money meant for his medical care. His decision to completely cut Charlotte out of his updated will was made with full cognitive capacity and firm resolve. Charlotte's early release after serving only 6 years of her 12-year sentence came as a shock to everyone who knew the details of her crimes. Her federal public defender had successfully argued that Charlotte's participation in prison education programs and claims of religious conversion demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. The parole board was apparently impressed by Charlotte's manipulation skills, which she had simply redirected from criminal activities toward convincing authorities that she had changed. Charlotte's release violated the terms of justice that her victims had been promised during sentencing. Charlotte's immediate violation of her parole restrictions, by contacting me at my workplace, showed that her time in federal prison had not changed her fundamental character. She appeared at my office building demanding to speak with me about her rightful share of our grandmother's estate, claiming that her criminal conviction had been based on false evidence and family persecution. Charlotte's appearance was dramatically different after 6 years in prison, but her manipulative behavior and sense of entitlement remained exactly the same. She still believed that she was the victim, and that everyone else owed her money and forgiveness. The restraining order that I had obtained before Charlotte's release was supposed to prevent any contact between us, but Charlotte had researched legal loopholes and technicalities that she believed would allow her to approach me in public places. Charlotte's new boyfriend, Damian Rodriguez, was a fellow ex-convict who specialized in debt collection and intimidation tactics. Damian's involvement suggested that Charlotte had recruited criminal associates to help her continue harassing and threatening the family members who had testified against her. Charlotte's vandalism of my car outside the office building escalated her parole violations into new criminal charges that would send her back to federal prison. Security cameras captured Charlotte and Damian smashing my car windows and spray painting threats on the vehicle while I was inside the building working. Charlotte's behavior during the vandalism showed the same rage and sense of entitlement that had driven her original crimes. She apparently believed that she deserved to destroy my property because I had testified truthfully about her criminal activities. The arson attempt at our grandmother's house represented Charlotte's most dangerous escalation and her complete abandonment of any pretense of rehabilitation or remorse. Charlotte and Damian's plan to burn down the family home was thwarted only by alert neighbors who called the fire department when they smelled gasoline and saw suspicious activity around the property. The arson attempt was clearly intended to destroy the symbol of my inheritance and possibly kill me if I had been inside the house during the fire. Charlotte's arrest for the arson attempt triggered additional federal charges for domestic terrorism and violation of parole that would result in a much longer prison sentence than her original crimes. Federal prosecutor Daniel Kim explained that Charlotte's post-release criminal behavior proved that she was an ongoing danger to public safety who could not be trusted to live in civilized society. Charlotte's claims of rehabilitation had been exposed as another manipulation scheme designed to reduce her time in federal custody. Kevin's decision to relocate his family to another state reflected the ongoing threat that Charlotte posed even from prison. Kevin's construction business was portable enough to establish operations in a new market, and his family needed the psychological distance from Charlotte's continued criminal activities. Kevin's mother, Mrs. Blackwood, also moved to be closer to her son and grandson, recognizing that Charlotte's presence in Colorado made their family vulnerable to continued harassment and potential violence. The second sentencing hearing for Charlotte's post-release crimes provided additional evidence of her antisocial personality disorder and complete inability to function as a law-abiding citizen. Dr. Maria Santos, a prison psychologist, testified that Charlotte had spent her 6 years in federal custody studying legal loopholes and planning new criminal activities rather than participating in genuine rehabilitation programs. Charlotte's prison behavior had included manipulation of other inmates, attempts to smuggle contraband, and threats against correctional staff who enforced institutional rules. Charlotte's final sentence of 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole meant that she would likely spend the rest of her productive adult life in custody. Judge Patricia Williams explained that Charlotte's post-release crimes proved that she was incapable of rehabilitation and posed a continuing danger to her victims and the general public. The sentence reflected not just punishment for Charlotte's crimes, but protection for the community from her ongoing criminal behavior and violent tendencies. Charlotte's assignment to Federal Correctional Institution Coleman in Florida was specifically chosen because of its maximum security classification and distance from her victims in Colorado. Charlotte's placement in administrative segregation for the first 5 years of her sentence was designed to prevent her from recruiting new criminal associates or planning additional crimes against her family members. The isolation would also limit Charlotte's ability to manipulate other inmates or correctional staff through her practiced charm and false claims of victimization. 8 years have passed since I first discovered Charlotte's betrayal outside my grandmother's house, and the journey from victim to survivor has taught me profound lessons about family, trust, and personal resilience. The house that Charlotte tried to steal has been transformed into a successful bed and breakfast that honors our grandmother's memory while providing me with financial independence and emotional healing. The rooms where Charlotte and I once played as children now welcome guests who appreciate the historic charm and peaceful atmosphere that took years of renovation and emotional work to create. Kevin's friendship has remained one of the most positive outcomes from our shared trauma of Charlotte's crimes. His construction expertise was invaluable during the house renovation, but more importantly, his understanding of betrayal and recovery provided emotional support during the darkest periods of legal battles and family destruction. Kevin's new life in Arizona with Lisa and his son represents the possibility of rebuilding after devastation, and their annual Christmas cards remind me that healing and happiness are possible even after profound betrayal. Dad's final years were spent in peace and dignity at his veteran care facility, surrounded by people who respected his service and protected him from Charlotte's manipulation. His decision to leave his remaining assets to veteran charities rather than family members reflected his understanding that blood relationships don't guarantee loyalty or love. Dad's death 2 years ago was peaceful, and his funeral was attended by dozens of fellow veterans and care facility staff who had come to love his gentle spirit and quiet wisdom. Charlotte was not notified of his death or burial location. The victim advocacy work that grew out of my experience with Charlotte's crimes has become a meaningful career that helps other families navigate the aftermath of financial fraud and family betrayal. Many victims struggle with guilt and shame about being deceived by people they trusted, and sharing my story helps them understand that criminal manipulation is sophisticated, and that being victimized doesn't reflect personal weakness or failure. The support groups I facilitate have helped hundreds of people rebuild their lives and learn to trust again after devastating betrayals. Charlotte's life in federal prison has been marked by continued manipulation attempts and violent behavior that have extended her sentence through additional disciplinary charges. Reports from correctional staff describe Charlotte as an inmate who refuses to accept responsibility for her actions and continues to blame her victims for her imprisonment. Her attempts to recruit other inmates for schemes against her family have resulted in solitary confinement and loss of privileges that might have made her incarceration more tolerable. Charlotte's prison experience reflects the natural consequences of a life devoted to manipulation and crime. The financial recovery from Charlotte's crimes took nearly 5 years and required extensive legal work, but the emotional recovery has been more complex and ongoing. Therapy helped me understand that Charlotte's betrayal reflected her character flaws rather than any failure on my part to recognize danger signs or protect myself adequately. Learning to trust new people while maintaining appropriate boundaries has been challenging, but the friendships and romantic relationships I've developed since Charlotte's imprisonment are healthier and more authentic than the relationships I had when family obligation trumped honest assessment of character. The decision to visit Charlotte in federal prison 3 years ago was motivated by my need for closure rather than any desire for reconciliation or forgiveness. Charlotte's attempt to manipulate even that final meeting by claiming terminal illness and begging for financial support confirmed that her fundamental character had not changed despite years of incarceration. The visit provided clarity that Charlotte remained the same manipulative, self-centered person she had always been, and that my healing didn't require her participation or acknowledgement of the damage she had caused. Charlotte's continued letter-writing campaigns from prison have been returned unopened for the past 5 years, and her attempts to contact me through intermediaries have been ignored and reported to parole authorities. The restraining orders remain in effect and will be renewed automatically for the remainder of Charlotte's sentence and any potential future release. My decision to maintain complete separation from Charlotte is based on self-preservation rather than anger, recognizing that some people are simply too dangerous to allow back into your life under any circumstances. The family relationships that survived Charlotte's crimes have been strengthened by shared trauma and the recognition that chosen family can be more loyal and trustworthy than blood relatives. Miranda's friendship has deepened over the years, and her children call me aunt even though we share no genetic connection. Kevin's son has maintained contact despite his geographic distance, and his college graduation last spring felt like a celebration of resilience and hope. These relationships remind me that family is defined by love and commitment rather than shared DNA. The bed and breakfast business has provided not only financial stability, but also daily reminders that our grandmother's house represents love, hospitality, and positive family traditions rather than the site of Charlotte's betrayal. Guests often comment on the peaceful atmosphere and sense of history in the renovated rooms, and their appreciation helps heal the emotional wounds that Charlotte's crimes inflicted on this sacred family space. The business has also created employment for several local residents and contributes to the community's economic development. The legal advocacy work that emerged from my experience with Charlotte's case has influenced state and federal legislation designed to protect elderly and vulnerable adults from financial exploitation by family members. The power of attorney reforms that resulted from Dad's victimization have made it more difficult for criminals like Charlotte to steal from elderly relatives without detection. These systemic changes ensure that Charlotte's crimes contributed to positive outcomes that will protect other families from similar devastation. Reflecting on this 8-year journey from betrayal to healing, I understand that Charlotte's actions revealed truths about family dynamics and personal character that needed to be acknowledged regardless of how painful that recognition proved to be. Charlotte's willingness to fake my death and steal my inheritance demonstrated that she had never truly loved me as a sister, but had viewed me as a resource to be exploited when circumstances required it. This understanding was devastating initially, but ultimately liberating, because it freed me from the obligation to maintain relationships with people who viewed me as prey rather than family. The most profound lesson from Charlotte's betrayal is that forgiveness and reconciliation are separate concepts that don't require each other for emotional healing. I have forgiven Charlotte in the sense that I no longer carry anger or desire for revenge, but forgiveness doesn't require me to trust her again or allow her back into my life. Forgiveness was something I did for my own peace rather than a gift I gave to Charlotte, and it allowed me to focus on building positive relationships rather than dwelling on past trauma. Standing in our grandmother's garden this morning, watching guests enjoy breakfast on the restored porch, I feel grateful for the journey that brought me to this place of peace and purpose. Charlotte's crimes destroyed the family I thought I had but revealed the strength and resilience I didn't know I possessed. The house that Charlotte tried to steal has become a symbol of survival and transformation rather than loss and betrayal. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals force us to build better lives than we could have imagined possible. The question I'm often asked by other fraud victims is whether I would change anything about how I handled Charlotte's crimes if I could go back and do it differently. My answer is that I would have recognized Charlotte's manipulative patterns earlier and protected our father and Kevin from her crimes, but I wouldn't change my decision to pursue justice regardless of family pressure to forgive and forget. Some betrayals are too severe to overlook, and protecting other potential victims is more important than preserving family harmony built on denial and enabling. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to rebuild your life after devastating loss? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your experiences might help other people who are struggling with similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity and finding justice. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding that healing is possible even after the most profound betrayals. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how others choose to treat you. Choose relationships with people who see your value and treat you with the respect you deserve.